So Lorena asked me to share a little bit about what life was like for our resident at OTSG in the Health Facility Planning Agency, and a little bit about portfolio project selection and how we manage some of that competency exposure. That building that I just showed you was the Defense Health Headquarters, which is where we're located along with the Navy and the Air Force Surgeons General, as well as the Director of the Defense Health Agency, Vice Admiral Raquel Bono. The DHHQ was stood up with consolidated offices following BRAC 2005 for you civilians. That's the base realignment and closure, congressionally mandated actions that cause us to close facilities, consolidate facilities. So BRAC 2005 forced this alignment under one roof, and one of the goals was to ensure the security of the folks in the building, and in particular our Surgeons General. You have to have CAC authentication to get into the parking lot, CAC authentication to get into the building. This is what I call the Bumblebee chart. You're not expected to be able to see anything on this chart. I call it Bumblebee because obviously of the colors. It's intended to depict a little bit of the magnitude of the organization, the Office of the Surgeon General. The Army Surgeon General is also the commander of Army MedCom. So she has staff up in Falls Church, Virginia, and staff right down here in San Antonio. You can see there with the red where the Health Facility Planning Agency is. And this chart, like I said, you can't see all the departments, but she has multiple assistant chiefs and special assistants, such as personnel, resources, logistics, operations, readiness, congressional liaison, and facilities, to name just a few. The Health Facility Planning Agency is led by Colonel Mike Brennan, who is the commander of the HFPA, but he's also double-hatted in this chart as one of her assistant chiefs for facilities. There you go. We've heard a lot about the Defense Health Agency. Well, not a lot. We've heard some this morning. They have the primary responsibility for military medical programming for capital investments. But the HFPA represents the Army Surgeon General in the planning, the design, the construction, and the turnover of these Army military medical capital investment projects. So within the Health Facility Planning Agency, where I work, we have expertise in clinical planning, equipment planning, architectural layout, mechanical engineering, communication systems planning, you know, the MHS Genesis thing, and interior design for these projects. But in addition, we support modernization, revitalization, and renovation projects. So here's another one that you can't see, but that's okay. The Surgeon General tasked us to create a primary care clinic in Fort Greely, Alaska. Fort Greely was a TRICARE Prime remote site, and a number of factors compelled the Army to determine that they wanted a facility for primary care delivery at Fort Greely. For those of you that don't know, it's about 100 miles north of Fairbanks, Alaska, and it's quite rural. This modernization project required us to develop a concept of operations working with the staff at Bassett Army Community Hospital. We're going to create something from nothing to understand what services we would provide there, pretty remote site, how we would staff it, and to develop a program for design for the conversion of a gymnasium to a primary care clinic. So why am I telling you this? Because a lot of people don't know what we do in the HFPA, and in fact, it's actually quite a challenging and wonderful place for a Baylor resident to start off, because it requires a lot of coordination with some of the various divisions within HFPA, within the region, and within the MTF. So we developed this A3, and I put the A3 up there, although later we were told that the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Health Affairs wanted to reserve the term A3 for his use. So we quickly converted this to what we call the Facility Analysis Support Tool. And the way it's designed, these are also used when we go forward with Defense Health Agency for capital investments. At the top, we have the installation mission And if there is a facility there, we have the MTF mission. And then starting from left to right, it's intended to be somewhat of an analytic tool, but also we use it for communicating things through the chain of command. So on the left side, we typically depict where are we? You know, where are we in this, this need? And we work to the right. If we have a facility, we will talk about the age of the facility, the cost to replace the facility, how many square feet are in the facility, what's the condition of the facility. And we move to the right, and then where we look at the active duty troop strength, because we need to plan associated with population, workload, and staffing. So all of this comes together, in particular for the Fort Greeley project, because we were required to brief the MedCom Chief of Staff on everything I just told you. What were we going to do in the way of services up there? How were we going to staff it? What was going to be the cost to do this project? And what was the timeline for completion? And here is our result. That little picture up at the top, there was a teeny weeny little, probably just one room aid station. And I don't have a picture of the TRICARE Prime Remote Providers Clinic, but this is the new Greeley Clinic, which was the converted gymnasium. As well, I talked about architectural support. Program for design is how big is the box, right? We're all driven by criteria. DOD and VA is driven by criteria. How big is the box? And it drives how we plan things. So our architect then has to take this thing we said, here's how big the box is going to be. They need a lab, they need a whatever, 2 bathrooms and exam rooms. And our architect decides, is it going to fit inside this footprint? Okay, because we are strapped inside the envelope. So that's a key part of how we do our work. We have a very multidisciplinary team. So one of the most important, we've had a lot of this preceptor role discussion this morning, but one of the things I want to share is really the most important thing you can have as a baseline on your of your resident. What is the resident's background and experience? My current resident is an Army major with 9 years of Army medical clinical experience and 4 years as a civilian paramedic. As well, he deployed with the 21st Combat Support Hospital in Kuwait. So my resident knew how to walk the walk, okay? He understood healthcare delivery. He understood how hospitals operate at this clinical level and the interrelationships between the various departments, the ED, the ward, the OR, the ICU, facilities, supply, etc. So I found that a key component of my role was to open doors and make introductions and connections to facilitate the rotations and the experiences needed to address his JMISI competencies. The Bumblebee chart showed you the magnitude of our organization. So it was incumbent that in addition to understanding what we did at HFPA, Major Graybill was able to lead there understanding what happens at the Office of the Surgeon General and MedCom. So it was through these introductions and connections that Major Graybill became engaged in a variety of projects, many of which contributed to his portfolio. And one of the advantages of our residency site is we have a number of Army-Baylor University alumni, including, at the time, the Chief of Staff of MedCom, the Congressional Affairs Coordinating Officer, the Director of Strategy Management, as well as the Deputy of the Defense Health Agency, Mr. Guy Kiyakawa, who is a Baylor alum from 1995. So understanding the residents' needs is very important, but it's really equally as important to understand that they may not know what they don't know. And this is where you step in. You know, as an example, because my resident had extensive clinical experience and perhaps was giving himself a little higher grade on his bear than he might have in some of these competencies, you know, I chatted with him and I said, you know what, we really need to get you out there to Walter Reed and or Belvoir Community Hospital. You need to get out there to some of those executive committee meetings. You have to understand what happens when a physician's privileges are stripped. You have to understand the executive committee of the medical staff. You have to understand some of the highest level of political and operational challenges that happen in a hospital. So we were able to make that happen. Many of you know we probably have a preceptor at both Walter Reed and Fort Belvoir Community Hospital, which was really great. So in addition to these introductions and connections, facilitating exposure if possible to any training that your resident can use that will benefit them moving forward. In our case, we were able to get him to training on the M2 or the MHS SMART, which is a primary tool that he will use when he becomes an NMA at Fort Belvoir Community Hospital next year. Additionally, he attended 2 key conferences, the Healthcare Design Conference and the Health Facilities Institute, and he spoke at the HFI. We reined him in and we said, listen, we're going to be talking to the folks at the Health Facility Institute about the implications from a facility perspective on the deployment of MHS Genesis. All right, so let's get busy. We got a PowerPoint presentation to put together. And he achieved evidence-based design accreditation certification after sitting for the exam at the Healthcare Design Conference. And that was a really nice accomplishment because we do build our facilities against evidence-based design criteria. So his first project fit naturally into the work we do at the Health Facilities Planning Agency, but it was coupled with his experience because he had been a critical care nurse at Blanchfield Army Community Hospital in Fort Campbell, Kentucky. So we had a dated program for design to renovate this ICU. And the Regional Health Command asked us to update it, validate it, review it. So Captain Gray Bill at the time, now he's a major, did quite an excellent job on looking at this old program for design. He relied on the fact that he had worked in that ICU. He actually made interviews with the staff at Blanchfield and developed a revised program for design and a ConOps, which resulted in a $1.5 million initial savings and $130 annual savings. That was a pretty phenomenal project. And he did this all in the course of about a 2-week period. He did a great job. What he discovered was he was using the old model was using DoD criteria, which told us you needed to have, I'm going to just random, either 2 isolation rooms or 2 bariatric rooms, I can't remember which it was, and they wanted a CT scanner because they're a critical care unit. Well, he discovered that the data from the infection control risk assessment said they did not need 2 isolation rooms, and there was a CT scanner right down the hall. So he did a phenomenal job because when you deviate from DoD criteria, you just merely have to justify it because there's an audit trail that shows why did you design or build it that way. So that was his first project. So this year, I think we've already heard there were 6 other residents in the national capital area, so it really just seemed prudent to maximize the introduction and connections with a number of key leaders up here at the DHHQ for all 7 residents. So we planned a week for them to come out to the DHHQ. It was early September, mid-September, and they were able to hear personally from key leaders. They actually had a table talk with the Deputy Surgeon General, the Director of Strategy Management from OTSG, the Deputy Director from the Defense Health Agency, and Dr. Mike Deneen, the Director of the Office of Strategy Management for the Military Health System. Those are just a few of the people that we put together. And you can see in this picture, they're here with Mr. Guy Kiyakawa. He's a good supporter. Additionally, as a result of a local ACHE event, we were able to engage retired General Coots, who is currently the President and CEO of Holy Cross Health in Silver Spring, Maryland. Dr. Coots was a real hit. He was able to provide a beautiful overview of the contrast between administering in the military and administering in the private sector, and talked about the challenges up at Holy Cross Health, which included the Medicare payer system, the challenges of security in and around his multiple facilities with a lot of gang activity in that area, and the opportunity for residents to circle back with him, to come out to his facility, or to ask any questions. They also had a tour of the Pentagon, including the Secretary of the Army's office, which at the time happened to be vacant, and they were told unequivocally, do not post anything on social media, because they were sitting in his chair, okay? We also had a brown bag during that week so that we could introduce them to more of the Baylor alum at DHHQ just to expand their network one step further. That turned out to be pretty nice as well. Okay, additional projects. Well, as I mentioned already, part of my role was open the doors for him, help him make the connections in the various divisions within the Surgeon General's office. But so the projects, they came to him as a result of the coordination during his rotations. I already mentioned his first project, but additional projects resulted from identifying a key challenge or problem to be solved with real time. All right, real time. And I already mentioned that we have a lot of Baylor alumni up there, which was really great. And so you say, well, why does that matter? Well, the reason I think we had some success, not that every one of his rotations had a Baylor alum at the end, was because they understand the program, and they understand the residency, and they understand the competencies. And I have discovered it is very easy for people to really not understand what to do with this person, right? They don't always know exactly what to do with this person. So you might have to shape that a little bit. An example was, well, a good example was his rotation with the Director of Strategy Management, who also coordinates the Six Sigma program and projects, resulted in his second portfolio project, which allowed him to be involved with a team that actually had a deliverable for the Surgeon General as a result of some staffing lateness. So I did my utilization tour at the Navy Surgeon General's office, and I still have a number of shipmates out there at BUMED who assisted us in coordinating this road trip to tour the Comfort. The Bears had a wonderful briefing and a tour from the Director of Nursing and his team on board the Comfort. This is an 894th ship that was designed to treat wounded combat personnel and has a secondary mission to the Navy to deploy in response to natural disasters. So in September of 17, we were supposed to go down there and have our tour, but the ship was deployed to hurricane-battered Puerto Rico. The medical facilities, as you know, were especially hard hit by Maria, and the majority of the 69 hospitals on the island were without electricity or fuel to run backup generators. So this was their first civilian mission in 7 years. Prior to that, they went to Haiti in 2010, and they also went to the Gulf of Mexico in 2005 after Katrina. This ship is equipped to carry as many as 1,000 hospital beds, 12 operating rooms, and one of America's largest trauma units. So it took the ship and the crew about 72 hours to load and prepare before they shipped out after the order to deploy came. It was a really nice tour that we had. So closing thoughts, encourage your residents to take opportunities. When I did the introductions and the coordination, part of it during the September week, part of it personally one-on-one, I told Captain Graybill, I said, you take every opportunity that you can to get to some of these things. And I told Colonel Tracy Michael, our CACO, Congressional Affairs Coordinating Officer, you get him to the Hill whenever you can, okay? So when the opportunity came up, Major Graybill was able to go to the Hill, tour the Capitol, and at least be exposed to some of the members of the HASC and the SASC. So you know your organization best, and really you need to help your resident understand your organization. Sometimes we've heard, you know, not sometimes, we have heard we're developing leaders, right? And sometimes the leaders are resident. There's high expectations placed on them, and they may not feel comfortable saying, well, like you said, I have no clue what somebody just said, right? You just said, I have no clue what they said. They use too many acronyms. I don't even know what you mean. So help them. This is done during your weekly or however often you sit and talk with your resident to allow them to say, well, you know, I went through this department, but they were talking about such and such, and I think they want me to do this, but I'm not sure I understand it. Align the rotations with the needs as per their bear and the competencies. That's part of the exercise that Lorraine went through this morning. Introductions and connections, open the door. That is really so important. Stay flexible. That's the, oh, this opportunity came up. Can I go do it? Yep. And ensure regular pulse checks with your resident, particularly, are they overcommitted? You know, I actually did allow Major Graybill to get in a little too deep. Why? Because it was a learning experience, right? And he sized it up, and I said, let me know if I need to extract you. And he said, I got it. So he managed it, and it produced a portfolio project, actually. Do they have a strategy to get through their project, through their year, through their rotation? And really importantly, are they reaching back to their Baylor faculty? That is really important. That's why they're all here. Some of them, most of them, all of them are experts in some area that I know I'm not. So if he's working a project and he says, I'm not quite sure this is the right, you know, approach for this particular analysis, have you reach back to your faculty member? So that's pretty important. So we had a great year. And looking forward to another great year, and I think we have at least one preceptor, another preceptor, probably a couple more. I think Colonel Lee's going to be up there, so that's great. So now we'll have even more synergy next year. Any questions? Okay, thank you. Oh, sorry.
So, ma'am, so it sounds like to me, so although you coordinated some of this stuff, were you heavily involved in the projects that they picked, or did you let that kind of naturally kind of evolve as their residency took place?
I was heavily involved with Project One, which was in our division, as I facilitated exposure to various, I'm going to call it linkages. Major Graybill would come and chat with me and talk with me about what they wanted him to do, and we agreed that it would be a viable project, how much time it was going to take, and I repeatedly had him update his schedule because I needed him to understand not everything runs like this, right? Sometimes you're going to have a rotation here, and you'll have started with this division, working a project, it's going to run parallel here. So for the most part, I was most heavily involved with Project One, and then pulse checks on the other projects he was working with the other folks, just to make sure he was going to make his deliverable and that he felt comfortable with his approach. And as I mentioned, when he was getting himself in a little too deep, if he needed some help getting it back out of there, okay? Good, thank you.